All right, the Pelicans should have won game one of their playoff series, but CJ McCollum and Brandon Ingram let the Oklahoma City Thunder off the hook. It's a post-game one playoff edition of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans at NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube, where we have almost 10,000 Pelicans fans. So please subscribe. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I forgot if I already introduced myself. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. Here with y'all after game one, where the Pelicans lose to the Oklahoma City Thunder 94-92. I'm not going to sugarcoat it for you. The Pelicans could have won this game, should have won this game, but their two best players in this game completely let them down. We'll break it down in today's episode, a post-game reaction episode of Locked On Pelicans here. Then I want to get into how the defense was really good, the role players playing well, all of that. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase here. This is, of course, a live show, so I appreciate y'all being in here. We're not going to do a bonus segment. I'm just going to run it down for you what happened in this game. And what happened in this game was the Pelicans actually played really well. Was the offense perfectly beautiful, pretty at times? Absolutely not. But you were on the road against a well-rested team when this team, the Pelicans, just played on Friday. The Thunder have been off essentially for a week, and you had a chance to win the game. And all you needed to do to win that game was your best players to not even play well. Not even play well. We're not asking too much here. Just play average. And they did not do that. Brandon Ingram in this game was 5 of 17 for 12 points. CJ McCollum, the Pelicans' other best player, was 9 of 22, 2 of 9 from 3 for just 20 points. 20 points on 22 shots, and then for Brandon Ingram, 12 points on 17 shots. Look, Zion Williamson's out. These are your other two best players. It is your time to step up, and repeatedly now, they have not done that, and that is a concern. They've played well at times this season. We know they're good basketball players, but this is where you build a legacy for yourself. This is where you establish new narratives, and they both failed. I don't know if you would call this the first test, but this was the biggest test they've had by far, and they completely failed that, and it's the reason the Pelicans lost. The defense, we'll get into that later in the show, was absolutely excellent in this. Jonas Valanciunas had a good game. Larry Nance Jr. also had a good game, I thought, and you squandered that. Role players had a good game. Trey Murphy, we'll talk about him being the leading scorer for New Orleans, but you didn't have guys that could just get it done when you needed it. The Pelicans scored just 2 points in the final 3 minutes of this game. And let's start with the final play because that sums up everything here. After the Pelicans had a smart foul on Chet Holmgren, sent him to the line, he missed one. The Pelicans were down 2. So you have a chance to either tie and send this to overtime or go for the win with a three-pointer and steal home court advantage. And what do the Pelicans do? After a timeout, when you draw something up, they just could not go out and execute. The ball gets inbounded to CJ McCollum. The ball never leaves his hand, and he just chucks up. Look, the shot was close, don't get me wrong, but that was a terrible three-pointer. Process over results. The results weren't bad, but the process to get there was absolutely atrocious. They needed CJ McCollum or anyone just to play average basketball, and you couldn't get that. This was a winnable game. You, as a Pelicans fan, might look at this and try and take a moral victory from it, and you wouldn't be necessarily wrong for that. But here's the thing. The Thunder are going to make adjustments, right? You can't have your star players play like this again. They're going to be better. You need to match them. Do you feel confident in Brandon Ingram doing that and CJ McCollum doing that? Let's look at their games a little bit individually here. Let's start with Brandon Ingram because he had a bad game. 12 points on 17 shots. He shot under 30% from the field in this one. It's terrible. 3 assists, 6 rebounds, a block, 2 turnovers. He took just 2 threes. On the preview show that I did, not me and Rylan Stiles of Locked on Thunder, by the way, go watch that if you want a little bit more insight into this game. If you're an everydayer, you already did, because a lot of things that were said in that crossover show came true in this game. I did my own show kind of previewing it, and I said Brandon Ingram can dominate this game if he does 2 things. Let's get to the rim and shoot threes. He did neither of those things in this game. He took 3 shots in the restricted area. Everything else was a mid-range jumper. Of those, what did I say it was? 17 shots, 5 of them were either in the restricted area or from 3. So was that 12 shots just from long mid-rangers, and he only made 3 of those. 3 of 12 on that mid-range shot that he loves, right? That isn't going to cut it. Multiple times he got near the rim and just passed out. I don't know why. People are going to make a lot about the officiating in this game, and while I agree it wasn't particularly great, it wasn't really getting called either way for either team. But the Pelicans could probably have more than 9 free throws if Brandon Ingram brings some aggression to his game and tries to get to the rim. They don't call fouls on mid-range jump shots because teams want you to take it, so they're not going to foul you. Get to the rim. Shoot threes. He didn't in this game. That mid-range isn't going to work unless he's hitting them at a 60% rate, and he doesn't do that. CJ McCollum, 9 for 22. Too many times it was hero ball. Too many times it was just ISO hero ball, and multiple possessions he would get the ball and no one else would touch it. There were multiple times Larry Nance Jr. was open in pick and roll situations. He would set the screen for CJ, roll down, and they would throw 2 at CJ because they were worried about his 3-point shot if they played drop coverage, if they defended him and gave him some space, but he never got the ball really to Larry Nance Jr., maybe once or twice, once for sure. Smart basketball. This team, when they rely on isolation style, and that includes post-ups to Jonas Valanciunas, which they didn't do in this game, aren't how they win. And so while they played well in this game, they could have won this game. They should have won this game. These 2 stars let them down. Let them down completely. There's no excuse for it. Brandon Ingram all season has known he needs to take more threes. He has refused to do so. We'll get into more of that in the offseason talk, so make sure you subscribe to Locked On Pelicans wherever you get your podcasts and join almost 10,000 Pelicans fans on YouTube, because we'll get into that more. But we talked about it in the preview show. He's got to take more threes. He didn't. Get to the rim more. He didn't. This is not how you win basketball games in the playoffs at all. CJ McCollum passed the ball. When this team is in the half court, the way they win is ball movement. We'll talk about that with not Larry Nance Jr., with Jonas Valanciunas and how they used him, not running their offense through him, but simply including him in the offense. That's how they win. They abandon that for stretches at a time, and it's summed up on that final play. This was a waste. This was a waste. They should have won, and they completely snatched defeat from the jaws of victory. Did I get that right? Ross Jackson, who's here with me, he's not going to make an appearance on the show, is giving me a thumbs up. Everyone, by the way, make Locked On Saints your second listen. It's draft week. He's going to tell you who the Saints are going to draft here. Everything black and gold. I don't need to tease it later now. So we need a little bit of humor here because this was annoying. The Pelicans should have won. Sum up this segment. Brandon Ingram, CJ McCollum let them down. I want to look at the center position. I want to look at the role players because they did everything they should. Najee Marshall was great. Trey Murphy was great. I liked the minutes from Jonas Valanciunas and Larry Nance Jr. as well. Let's talk about that, because if they give you that kind of performance, they're the reason the Pelicans should have, could have, whatever word you want to use, won this game, and the Stars let them down. But the role players did their job. Let's talk about them and how good they were and how important that is going forward, coming up here next in a live post-game edition of Locked On Pelicans. Right now, though, I'm excited to tell you about Monopoly Go because I've been addicted to this thing. It's really, really fun. So I've been told I'm a competitive person. Ross over here is going to agree with me. So yeah, I have a competitive side, and my competitive side is a big fan of Monopoly Go, and I'm sure you've heard of it because it's been downloaded over 150 million times. And it's a great twist on Monopoly where you play on not just one, but hundreds of Monopoly boards in crazy locations, building up amazing cities that bring you big money. And there's a New Orleans board in there as well. And the best part, you can mess with your friends. I get to charge Ross rent on my iconic property properties, just like classic Monopoly here. I can also heist his vault and steal all of his riches for myself. And then there's leaderboards to show me where I am in the standings. So it's not just my competitive side that loves it. Ross and I work together too and win tournaments with other people around the world. So get in on the game and join your friends. Download Monopoly Go now free on the App Store and Google Play. Today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Game Time. I use Game Time for all of my ticket needs. I've sat courtside at the Pelicans, got a great deal on tickets because I bought them through Game Time. Went to go see the Saints lose, annoyingly so, to the Rams in SoFi Stadium. Great deal on seats through Game Time as well. And why I love Game Time? Because they take the kind of uncertainty out of buying tickets. You can see the view from your seats before you buy them. You know if it's a place you're going to for the first time, you're going to have the view that you want. Last minute deals. Are you a Game Time decision for going to Game 3 in New Orleans for this playoff series? Sometimes buying last minute means you can get a great deal. But if you bought early, it's fine too, because with the Game Time guarantee, if you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time is going to credit you 110% of the difference. So go to Game 3 or theater events, comedy shows, whatever you're looking for. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, coming to you live after the Pelicans lose to the Oklahoma City Thunder, making sense of what happened in this game, the star players letting them down. We'll get into the role players and then the defense too, because those were two things that, you love to see from this New Orleans Pelicans team, and I got a lot to talk about with them. So, for your second listen, it's Locked On Saints. Ross Jackson covering everything black and gold. It's draft week. Who are going to draft? Maybe a QB would be cool because Derek Carr sucks. So he's laughing. He'll let you know on the Locked On Saints podcast. So let's get into the role players here, because this was why the Pelicans were in this game and why they were in a very good position to try and win this one. And that's why the lead of this is the star players let them down because everyone else, including the coaches really, did their job. And that's all you can ask from role players, especially in the playoffs and especially on the road. Let's start with the center position, because this was something that worried me going into it. And the Pelicans, to their credit, had a good game plan of how to use Larry Nance Jr., how to use Jonas Valanciunas to minimize some of the damage that Chet Holmgren could do. Chet had just 15 points and 11 rebounds in this. He had 5 blocks. That's a problem, and we'll get into that in a second. 2 of 6 from 3, but overall didn't have the biggest impact in this game like you would have expected. The center position did a really good job of playing him, just letting him shoot open threes. Yes, he's a good three-point shooter, but the way, and we'll talk about this in the next segment when we look at the defense, is you want them being a jump shooting team. You limit one of their big advantages, and the Pelicans did a good job of that. I'll tell you what that is coming up next. So they played the center position well. Jonas Valanciunas was included in the offense, not running the offense through him. This was not let him post up and then try and work Chet. It doesn't work. Chet's a really good defender, and every time they just really tried to post up Larry Nance Jr. and let him use his strength over Chet, it didn't go well. When you just let him naturally be a part of the offense, that's when this works. That's why it's frustrating when they go to someone like Cody Zeller and then just do the stuff they should have done with Jonas Valanciunas. And to Willie Green's credit, they ran an 8-man rotation in this, really kind of, it's more 8. They had 9 guys play. Dyson was out there doing one of those token 4 to 5 minute shifts, either in the first half or second half, just one of them, to give guys a break. And this is something that most teams do. So they ran an 8-man rotation and trusted the role players here, letting everyone just be part of the offense. Ball movement in the half court is how they were going to score. And this was a defensive game. They weren't able to make the most of the turnovers for Oklahoma City. That's all right. More on that in a minute here. But on offense in the half court, you found some things that worked. Get the ball to Jonas, kick it out immediately. They weren't double teaming him. When they did, The Pelicans tried their best. They didn't do a good job. But just the execution was lacking with all of that. But the role players stepped up well enough. Valanciunas was 5 of 9. That's a good number for him. He doesn't need to take more shots than that. 13 points. His size was important because Oklahoma City Thunder is one of the worst defensive rebounding teams in the league. He had 9 offensive possessions. Now 9 offensive boards. The Pels didn't do a very good job of truly converting that. They had way more offensive boards. They had 24 second chance points, but it felt like there were multiple times they would get 3-4 offensive rebounds and weren't able to then really convert. 24 points on 18 offensive boards is not a truly good number here. But they were doing a good job of rebounding the ball. Better execution, better play from the star players would have won them this game. This was so frustrating. This is not because you're in the playoffs, one of those silver linings, because OKC is going to make adjustments and improve too. This is not, well, if they play better, they're going to win. It's going to be way tougher for the Pelicans going forward, and that's why this is a wasted opportunity. But Jonas played well. Nance Jr. in his minutes rolling to the basket, being a good defensive presence was good too. There are a couple of real frustrating possessions from him where he just threw the ball away and a couple of really bad passes that you didn't love from him in this game. But overall, he was solid. Look, I've talked about winning your minutes. Nance Jr. in this game being a 0 is fine. You didn't lose your minutes when you were out there on the court. Jonas Valanciunas just being a -2 is pretty good, all things considered, given that I think the Pelicans are at a very big disadvantage when it comes to the center position here. And it's on your other players to make up for it. That didn't happen in this game, and that's unbelievably disappointing. Other guys, though, did step up. You had Trey Murphy in this game really do his best. He was perfect for New Orleans in this one. There's not much to complain about him. We're going to look at the points here, but there was something else about his game that was awesome. 21 points, 5 of 12 from 3. That's a good number. 4 rebounds, 2 assists, 3 blocks. He was 8 of 18 from the field, but it's the 5 threes that are killer. There were a couple times when he heat checked a shot, like an early 3 in the offense that was deep, and I don't know about that. There's one where he shuffled to the left in the left corner, like 4 or 5 steps, and that wasn't it. Cut some of those out and just focus on what he's best at doing, and he can make a significant impact. He was probably the best player out there on the court for New Orleans in this one. If Trey Murphy plays like that and you get a solid game, an average game from Brandon Ingram and CJ McCollum, when the role players like Trey, Jonas, Herb Jones defensively was great, Larry, Najee Marshall, this is a beatable team. It's a beatable team, but this might have been the Pelicans' best chance to really steal a game in the series and tilt it in their favor. But not only was Trey scoring, it was his defense. It looked like he grew up before our eyes on the defensive side of the ball in this one. I've never seen him play that well defensively, using his length to really contest shots and bother guys like Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and others that he was switched on. He was phenomenal on that side of the ball. The Pelicans were really good overall. More on that coming up in the next segment here. Najee Marshall was also great. It doesn't show up in the stat sheet. 2 of 7, 1 of 4 from 3, right? But he had 4 rebounds, 4 assists. For a while there, you saw him know that the Oklahoma City Thunder are susceptible to getting beat on the boards. And so he went in for an offensive putback, got it, scored, was really aggressive on the defensive glass. This is a guy who knew what the weaknesses were for the Oklahoma City Thunder and went about trying to exploit it. He's a role player. That's not the guy that should be carrying you to victory. So the points and things like that from him are, Najee is more about making just the winning play and that hustle out there on the court. He was good in his minutes there, right? To get such a good performance from your role players when that isn't guaranteed in the playoffs on the road, and to squander that in a winnable game. Right? 94-92. That final play kind of sums it up. Just to have Lu Dort bothering Brandon Ingram that much. Lu Dort's a good defender. He's not that good of a defender. Everyone else did their job. Everybody else did their job except for Brandon Ingram and CJ McCollum in this one. And going into game 2, knowing that this team, the Thunder, are beatable, they have to step up. It's really as simple as that. We're going to talk about adjustments, things like that. I can sum it up with BI and CJ need to have 25 points minimum each. Simple as that. You can win. If they don't, your star players who are taking the majority of your shots, no matter how well your role players are, and we just talked about them here, it's not going to win you games. What can also win you games, though, is the defense, and it was phenomenal in this. I loved what the Pelicans did. Let's break down what their scheme was and how, you had Shai Gilgeous-Alexander score 28 points, but it wasn't that good of a game. And I'm going to tell you why and what the Pelicans did to disrupt him. That's coming up here next in a live post-game episode of Locked On Pelicans. Right now, though, I'm excited to tell you about PrizePicks because PrizePicks is America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 3 million members. It's the easiest and most exciting way to get in on the action while you watch your favorite sports and players. You just pick more or less on 2 or more players' stats projections, and then you watch the winnings roll in. So get in on the playoff action, and now you can win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks as you and the world's best players take on the game to a whole new level during basketball's postseason. You win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. That means you could turn $10 into $1,000. But they've also got the basketball, hockey, whatever it is you're looking for, they've got it over on PrizePicks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. Look, if you took Trey Murphy to score more than 2.5 threes, you would have won big in this game here, right? They also have quick withdrawals, easy gameplay, an enormous selection of players and stat types, and it's what makes PrizePicks the #1 fantasy sports app. So download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. It's free money right there. So if you deposit $100, they're going to give you $100 up to $100 when you download the app and use code LOCKEDONNBA. PrizePicks, pick more, pick less. It's that easy. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We are here Monday through Friday, the #1 Pelicans podcast, covering everything you want to know about the Pelicans' 94-92 loss to the Oklahoma City Thunder in Game 1 of their postseason series. There was a lot of good. The role players doing it. There's bad, the star players not doing it. Who knows what the series would look like if Zion Williamson were to have been healthy for it. And I still don't really think we're going to see him in this series at all, but that might evolve as it goes on and if the Pelicans can, steal a game. That's one of the reasons why this was so disappointing, to be honest with you. You have a chance to maybe get Zion back for game 6 or 7, let's say, potentially even game 5. Extend the series. You have like the reinforcements there potentially, not guaranteed. It's got to weigh on you, right? Like do that and maybe all of a sudden you can steal this when you weren't expected to because Zion comes in and wins you a game. So, of course, thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube where there's almost 10,000 Pelicans fans. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Check out the free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all the screaming. Locked On Sports Today. It's available on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's also on YouTube as well. This show's probably going to be on there tomorrow, making sense of Game 1 and how the Pelicans could have and should have won this one. And also go check out Locked On Saints. I have to say that because Ross is in the room with me. I'm trying to see if I can get you to laugh where like it wrecks the show a little bit, but no, he's a pro. But it's also draft week. So if you want to know what the Saints' future looks like, you've got to go check it out. He's doing great breakdowns and everything on all the prospects they could have. So let's continue to talk about the Pelicans losing to the Oklahoma City Thunder 94-92. Brandon Ingram, CJ McCollum didn't step up. The role players, though, did their job. And the team as a whole did a really good job of limiting the Oklahoma City Thunder to just 94 points. This is one of the best offensive teams in the league. They had where's their offense? Third best offense this season. They average 120 points per game, and you held them to 94. Right? That's a 26-point swing below their average. That's how good the defense was in this game. You can't waste performances like that. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is an elite player. He's one of 3 players in the running for the MVP, right? J-Dub is also an almost 20-point per game scorer. Chet Holmgren is a ridiculously talented big man, and you just limited them. But you got to take advantage of that, and that is on the Pelicans here. The defense was great. You can look at the numbers for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander here and see 28 points, 4 assists, right? Just 3 turnovers. Look, they defended him about as well as you could. We knew that Shai was going to be effective. And for all the people who think the Thunder don't have playoff experience, he actually has more playoff games under his belt than Brandon Ingram does. Than, pretty much almost anyone on this Pelicans team other than CJ McCollum and Jonas Valanciunas have. He's been here before. And they limited him. He had 28 points, but it took 24 shot attempts to do it, right? That's not great efficiency there at all. That's really being limited. Herb Jones did a great job on him. Trey Murphy, when he was switched onto him, did a really good job. You saw Brandon Ingram switched onto him. He did a really good job too. They limited him other than when it mattered the most, and we'll get to that in a second. He's one of the league leaders in drawing fouls and getting to the free throw line. He took just 7. That's below his average. That's about what the Pelicans have held him to at 6.5 in the games that he's played them this season. They did everything they could to limit him. Right? Try and turn him into a jump shooter. He didn't get to the rim. He didn't get into the paint like he normally does. That's how you beat this team. The Pelicans did a good job of really limiting that. But it wasn't enough because it takes a team effort here, right? They held OKC to just 42 points in the paint. Shai, it feels like he could do that in a game by himself. They forced him into 13 turnovers. That's a decent number there because this OKC team does not turn the ball over. They were one of the best in the league when it comes to that. But they couldn't turn those turnovers into points. They had just 14 points off those 13 turnovers. It was the star players not getting it done and limiting this Pelicans offense, despite the defense being elite and the role players being playing at an elite level. This is not one of those games. I usually have a lot of optimism where I come in and I say, glass half full. What if these guys play better? This was maybe your best chance to steal one, and the Pelicans let this one get away from them, right? They lost this game themselves versus the Thunder winning it. One of the final defensive possessions you saw where Shai Gilgeous-Alexander scored, I think it was an and one over CJ McCollum, was you had Herb Jones defending him. And what the Pelicans do is when there is a screen set, they just switch. The defender doesn't fight through the screen to stay on his original guy that he was defending. They just switch, go, I'll take the other guy, you take the other one. Communicate it, you switch. It's as simple as that. So you had Herb Jones on Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. CJ McCollum's man comes and sets a pick. CJ switches on to Shai. Look, Shai's got height and length, and CJ isn't a great defender. He is barbecue chicken at that point, right? Why would you switch when you already had Herb Jones on him? That's where those little things really matter in this game. Whether that's coaching, whether that's on the players, don't stick to what you're doing so blindly that you don't realize when you had an advantage in the first place. There's also something you can do that I expected the team to do more of, and they didn't in this game, and that's called pre-switching, where it lets CJ take Shai early on, knowing that they're going to set a screen, and then you switch Herb on to him, right? So that way you don't need, you still switch, which is what they do, but you pre-switch so you get the right matchup. And the Pelicans, man, those final couple possessions, right, in a close game, that's why they're, 0 in whatever the number is going into the fourth quarter and why they've struggled in clutch and crunch situations. Game within 5 minutes or less, they just really seem to crumble there a little bit. And it's that little things like attention to detail. The defense was good. The defense was really good in this game, limiting the Oklahoma City Thunder. They're a really good three-point shooting team, but the Pelicans were contesting as many threes as possible. They held them to just 31.3%. Oklahoma City led the league in terms of three-point percentage at 39% this season, right? That's almost an 8-point differential right there. You have to take advantage of those moments. Forcing the turnovers is great, but you can't squander that on the offensive end where you're not scoring in transition. Defense to offense. We've talked about that all year long. If you're, an everydayer of Locked On Pelicans, didn't take advantage of that. Josh Giddey, who for whatever reason lights this team up, went 1 of 6. He made 1 bucket. He had 2 points. Didn't make a 3. They didn't take advantage. A quiet game from Chet Holmgren. Again, defense doing a really good job here. Doesn't matter. Jalen Williams, 19 points, 18 shot attempts. Not efficient. The defense held up its end of the bargain and has been as good as advertised. There's a reason they were one of the top defenses all season long, and you saw it in this game. And this is so disappointing that the 2 stars who have to show up, they just didn't. That's why New Orleans lost this game. It's not on coaching. It's not on role players. It's not on anything like that, right? It's just simply on the star players not delivering. Look, this is a pivotal offseason for Brandon Ingram. He's due for an extension. How you feeling about that right now? Let me know in the comments down below here. If you're an everydayer, by the way, let me know in the chat as well. CJ McCollum, should he be starting? Should he be off the bench? I said in the preview show, CJ's still going to start. But look, if Jose keeps making an impact like he does off of the bench, and look, I'm surprised you had CJ out there instead of Jose in crunch time. That's what what Willie Green has done the past couple of games. Now, CJ had a big three at the end there too. And honestly, his three almost went in as time expired. But, this is not necessarily one of those things where it's like, if you make a couple of tweaks, you can win the next game. They played about as well as they could. Now, maybe if the star players play better, yeah. But I don't think OKC played well at all. If they play better too, it's going to take more than just the star players going up. There's a reason New Orleans was not favored in this series, but they had a chance to steal home court advantage. And Brandon Ingram and CJ McCollum straight up let them down. Like, it's as simple as that. Now we look for them to bounce back. How are they going to kind of respond to the adversity here? You metaphorically just got punched in the face if you're those guys. It is on you to respond. We'll see if they do it for game 2 on Wednesday night. We'll have more coverage on this series, this game, adjustments, what we want to see. I want to rewatch the game, and I'm going to be able to break it down a little bit better for you over the next couple of days as we'll get you set for Wednesday's show. May have a guest on as well during that time. So I appreciate y'all staying up late with me. It's almost midnight here in Central Time in New Orleans, breaking down the Pelicans' 94-92 loss to the Oklahoma City Thunder. Let me know your big reason for that in this game here. My watch literally just was like, good job working out for the past 31 minutes because my heart is racing from talking and being so animated here. So I appreciate y'all staying with me. Please subscribe to the Locked On Pelicans podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Subscribe on YouTube. We're going to do a live show after pretty much every single game. We'll have more content here. Taking no rest during a playoff series. And then, of course, during the offseason, we're going to get you set for everything. The draft, free agency, trades, because they're going to make some changes. And this series, this game probably told you that. That's all coming up here in the future of Locked On Pelicans. So I appreciate y'all rolling with me late here after game 1. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter. And I'll be back with y'all tomorrow. Go Pels.